Hi, welcome back to Friend Crush. I'm Amber Aquila. I'm your host, and this is my podcast where I talk about stuff and things chaotic, cute, and critical thinking. Hope everyone is doing well. If you are listening to this, I have successfully relaunched the podcast after a rebrand, so I hope you love it. Today, I want to talk about being good versus what is best for you. And I think, I always feel that there are so many different crossroads that we come to as we get older, and we kind of have to let go of, thoughts and conditioning that we received growing up and ideas of what is quote unquote good, and how we can be quote unquote good people. And honestly, the way that this creates delusion and blind spots, if we aren't actively questioning where this messaging has come from and whether or not now as adults we agree that this is how we want to live. Because as I have learned from my own reading and learning and from therapy, is that a lot of the times, like the patterns of behavior we display as adults were developed in childhood as a way of us being able to feel safe in our environment. And when you're a child, you don't have like a logical understanding of the world. So it's very common for people to develop like maladaptive patterns and unhealthy patterns, or to develop certain patterns of behavior that become unhealthy when they become adults, when they're children. And part of becoming like a healthy adult is building awareness around what these patterns are and being able to unlearn and retrain yourself. And obviously, easier said than done. But I think that just because something is hard doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a go if it's in service of your authentic self, your best interest, your authentic self being you being able to be in touch with what you really want and making sure that your actions are in alignment with that. It's really important to practice radical acceptance and think about where you're at, what your circumstances are, and how you can address like the problems that you're having based on that context, right? Don't compare yourself to somebody who has more privilege than you and think, oh, well, it's easier for them because whatever. So therefore, it's not worth me even trying. Of course, it's still worth you trying. And that's why people say don't compare yourself and that suffering is relative. And more money, more problems. Like all of these sayings are sayings for a reason because they basically describe the laws of the universe. At the end of the day, you have to sit with yourself and think about, okay, how did I get here? What was in my control? What was out of my control? How do I want to move forward? What is in my control, what is not out of my control, and how can I make sure that I'm able to move in a direction that is in alignment with what I want for myself and is going to be incremental improvements on the person that I am. I mean, that's my personal approach. I think that being able to understand that healing and growth isn't linear, and that part of the excitement of life and also the chaos and stress is that there are things that are unpredictable. We can't guarantee that we can move forward in a linear direction. But with the benefit of hindsight, whenever I look back on really distressing or difficult times in my life, I'm so grateful for the lessons that I learn after those experiences, rather than resenting the fact that, I didn't get to where I wanted to go at the speed that I initially thought was possible. It's important to be able to be given reality checks and to have your expectations not always being met the way that you want them to. Otherwise, life would be so boring if you wanted something and it just came to you so easily. You never really appreciate the things that you didn't earn. I think that is innate in human nature. We want to believe there are so many things we want to convince ourselves of consciously that simply go against the human experience and human nature. And having an awareness of these things is going to free you tenfold. It sucks that so many cliches and sayings lose meaning just by the fact that they're constantly being repeated. But for me, I always try to go back to what these sayings are actually trying to tell me when I think about different experiences that I've had and what I've learned. And I think for me, because I grew up in Australia, in a Western country, despite being Chinese, there is this like, and I can't speak for like what it would have been like for me to grow up in China, even though like now I engage and am in contact with and connected to contemporary China as an adult, my experience growing up is still very Western, even if I'm ethnically Chinese. And I still have like a lot of cultural influence from China growing up, but when I think about like the people that I knew who were mostly white when I was growing up and weren't Chinese, I can see that there is this obsession that people aren't aware of that I think is also innate in human nature to want to believe that you are a good person, quote unquote good. That I think a lot of this has to do with white supremacy and Western imperialism and the idea that white people are at the top of the food chain, that they have this inherent authority and privilege that cannot be questioned, that is actually built on a house of cards, and everything is relative to the white experience when you're growing up in a Western country, or at least for me when I was growing up. I think there's been like shifts and changes since then, but I wouldn't say that it's that major, mostly like symbolic and superficial changes, but not necessarily like in terms of the culture and dynamic that we're growing up in, or that people are growing up in now. So I think that because of this, it creates so many blind spots in the way that people perceive themselves and perceive others. And it's important to me to kind of build an awareness around this so that I can just like have as much information available to me as possible so that I can make informed decisions and not just do things that are motivated by the desire to be seen as good. Because I think that being seen as good and actually doing good are two very different things. And it's very, very easy to get these things confused because you don't necessarily realize that you're being motivated by a desire to be seen as good when you are actually like living that life. But we can see so many examples of how like virtue signaling and woke culture, social justice warrior culture has really tainted and stifled progress because people are more concerned with appearing good than actually doing good, or even acknowledging harm and acknowledging that, you know, within everybody there is light and dark and good and bad. And I think when I learnt that, you know, reality is actually essentially neutral and meaning is projected onto it by each individual, and every person has like a unique set of expectations that they've grown up with, a set of circumstances that they've grown up in, and this is what shapes the lens in which they see reality through. And the way that we create division is by insisting that the reality that I see is the right and the good reality, and the reality that other people see or are living by is the bad reality. But ultimately, like when you speak to someone that's in opposition of you, they believe that they are good too, even if you believe that they are bad, and vice versa. And I think the only way to break through that kind of division is having empathy for each other rather than immediately going to judging. And it doesn't mean that you have to allow anybody that disagrees with you or doesn't see your point of view into your life, but you can accept someone without the frustration that comes with trying to compel them to see your side, and then choose for yourself whether or not you allow that into your life. Now that I have the benefit of retrospect when it comes to a lot of the toxic friendships or relationships that I was in, I can see that a lot of the people that insisted on denying my lived experience as a Chinese Australian woman and the racism and misogyny that I experienced when I was growing up, they were so attached to the idea of them being good, of them as white people being good, that anything, including my lived experience, that challenged that idea was bad or an attack on their goodness and needed to be rejected and just simply couldn't exist. And I think I feel like I don't excuse their behavior or the way that they handle things, but I can accept that, you know, because of the environment that we grew up in, they weren't necessarily given an opportunity to question that. And I think it shows the closed-mindedness of some people when they're not open to having that reality challenged. Like I was having my reality challenged all the fucking time, and still I was trying to connect and understand where these racist, misogynist assholes were coming from, despite the amount of pain that I was experiencing just by being in proximity to them. And now when I look back, I can accept that experience for what it was. It all taught me a lot, and I'm grateful for that. But it didn't mean that I had to continue allowing that kind of energy, those kinds of people into my life. You know, I think when you're the one that's experiencing marginalization or that kind of conflict, like you feel like it's your responsibility to change people's mind. And when it's like a close relationship like that, you just being around kind of affirms to them that they're good. Even if you're saying to them and challenging the way that they think and the way that they behave in your words, by you still being there, they still think, well, I can't be that bad because she's still here. She's still talking to me. Even if we're disagreeing, she's still talking to me. The same way that, like, you know, if your ex checks up on you, if you had a really bad breakup with your ex and they check in on you, he's checking in with you because he doesn't want to feel like the bad guy. It doesn't matter if you reply in a really mean way or a dismissive way. The fact that you replied at all indicates to them that they're not as bad as they think they would be or are worried that they are, because you haven't completely cut them out altogether. Which is why I always tell girls that if you don't have any like material benefit from being in touch with your ex and it's very painful for you to remain in contact with them, cut them out. You actually don't owe them anything. And if someone has really hurt you and gotten to a point where you have to break up and you no longer can be in each other's life, that in and of itself is closure. Don't think that speaking to them and engaging with them when it's uncomfortable for you and at the cost of your own peace of mind is ever going to be worth it or ever going to give you the closure that you can actually give yourself just by focusing any energy that you would give to them on yourself. And it's such a hard thing to do because it's always tempting. Like, even for me telling you this, I've been in so many situations where people from my past have come back basically like seeking redemption, and I don't have to be mean or nasty to them. And sometimes I do feel like I have the capacity to respond and just, you know, close the chapter again if I need to. And it can be really difficult to do that and to feel confident in my decision. But ultimately, I know that I need to act in my best interests in order to be the best version of myself that I can be. And being around people that expect you to minimize who you are for their comfort and for the lack of their own courage isn't actually as noble as people want to make it out to be. And that's the thing with like seeing or wanting to be good. Even if you're aware of this, you know, like I still can feel guilt about not being able to be friends with somebody that wants to be my friend, even if I know that my friendship with them isn't that fulfilling for me. And even if I know that they're going to disrespect me if I'm friends with them, it's still hard to walk away from that for me. And obviously that's some kind of trauma response, I don't know. But, you know, like, again, it's like my desire to be seen as somebody who maybe doesn't give up on people or is willing to give people the benefit of the doubt can get in my own way sometimes when I'm not really looking at the way that I'm being treated and the way that I feel in knowing somebody. So this is why there is a difference between what is good and what is best for you. And what is best for you isn't always going to be what is good to somebody else, because what was best for me in my toxic relationships or friendships with people who minimized and dismissed my actual experience, my feelings. They wanted me to do that to make them comfortable, but that's not in my best interest. So that's also about like being able to sit with the fact that you're just going to be the bad guy in some people's eyes. If those people go around and say like, oh, Amber's a bitch because, you know, she didn't stick around for the racism that I was trying to gaslight her with, or she wouldn't accept that I couldn't accept that she couldn't take a joke when she's getting bullied or getting assaulted or getting harassed, then who the fuck cares? Do I need to put myself in a position where I'm experiencing those things when I do have a choice to walk away? Yeah. Pretty simple fucking answer, but it's so complicated and it feels so complicated when you're actually dealing with those sorts of situations. So important to be building awareness and reflecting around these sorts of experiences that you have, because we all have them. You know, it's like a collective human consciousness and experience that we're all in. Everybody's context might differ, but at the end of the day, the dynamics are the same. We've all been in a toxic friendship. We've all been in a toxic relationship. We all have had to choose between appearing good and doing good and being good in someone else's eyes and doing what is best for us. So it's really tough. Like, I'm not saying that it's okay, you've listened to this podcast and now your problems are solved. I'm merely trying to provide you perspective so that you can really think about how you can build more awareness around this for yourself and just choose more wisely and be more in tune with who you are. Like, it's not about doing what I would do, but getting in touch with what you really want to do and what's true to you. And that's different for everybody. Everybody has different limits. Everybody has different standards. Those things can change, but those are up to each person to decide. Like, I think of the example of when one of your friends is in like a shitty relationship. And, you know, for me, I think my limit or tolerance is usually around like the 3-month mark. Like, if I'm unhappy in a situation, whether it's work, friendship, relationship, for 3 months, I like am seriously reconsidering whether that needs to continue for me or not, because I just don't think that like life should be just suffering. I think we have more choice than we give ourselves credit for. And like, of course, you need to consider your specific circumstances in any given situation, but assess and have faith that if you make a decision that's in your best interest, you will be led towards more things that can nurture that in you. How can you possibly find a better experience or attract a better experience if you're in one that you already don't enjoy? You know, like I really feel like you have to let go of the things that kind of like hold you back or don't provide the amount of support and connection that you need in order to then make space and connect with what is really going to be right for you. And I have so many examples of this, like when I've walked away from when I've made a conscious decision to walk away from a situation that I'm really not happy in, and like I properly reflect and I think about what I've learned from it and how I would better approach in the future, how I can change my behavior in the future or my response in the future. And it's only a matter of time before the right opportunity or connection comes my way. And this isn't something that you can like necessarily explain like in a black and white way. I mean, I think there's more like neuroscience around it and stuff, but that's what like having faith is about. Even if you're not religious, like the concept of goodness is something that is like attached to Christianity and white supremacy. And so like you're not religious, but your life is being controlled by ideas from the Bible that you didn't even read, you know, like without even realizing, especially in a Western country. If you've grown up in a Western country, I think what is considered good and moral changes in different cultures. But being aware of like the way that you've been conditioned and how those ideas don't necessarily align with what you really want is going to really help in deciding how you can live more consciously. And you don't have to beat yourself up about what has already happened. I think that's very natural and common too. Like, oh my God, if only I'd known this earlier, blah, blah, blah. But, getting into the habit of being able to forgive your former self for working with what they had. Like a lot of people say that if you knew what people's childhood were like, you would understand why their behavior is the way that it is now. So much of adulthood is about like reparenting yourself, nurturing your inner child, and unlearning any like unhealthy patterns of behavior or thought patterns that you had from when you were younger, and just having faith in being able to be your authentic self and being able to choose what is best for you, even when it feels so uncomfortable and unfamiliar. The more that you do it, the better you will get at it. And I think sometimes it's good to just start really small, like really granular levels of choice, like asking yourself, is this really what I want to do? Is there something else that I would prefer? Like maybe it's you always feel like you're obligated to go to social events, but at the end of the day, you feel really tired, or you don't enjoy being hungover. And the next time you get asked out, maybe you really just want to stay home, and usually you would feel obligated to go out. But instead this time you're going to choose yourself and say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I'm just going to stay in. And then really pay attention to the way that people respond to you starting to draw boundaries, because the people, as they say, the people that get mad about you having boundaries are the ones that benefited from you having none, right? So it's tough to start building awareness around these things and realizing that, sometimes or a lot of the time you're not acting in your best interest, but it's okay. You don't have to think about right and wrong or good and bad. You can just think that it is what it is, radical acceptance, and from now on you've been blessed with the benefit of awareness and being able to see things in a new perspective, and you can make more conscious and intentional decisions moving forward so that you can get in touch with who you really are. You can work towards who you really want to be. And this isn't like an overnight process at all. It's an ongoing journey. That's what life actually is. It's not just the pursuit of superficial success and material success and material privilege, whatever. And it doesn't mean that you have to fully reject those things either. But I think just being conscious of how like full pursuit of those things at the expense of yourself and what you really need and what you want is never going to bring you the satisfaction that you maybe have been convinced that it will. And sometimes you need to go to those limits and experience the emptiness that comes with it in order to really have that perspective and then find your middle ground. And that's what they mean when they say that progress isn't linear. And you might have to go to one extreme in order to find the middle ground, or some people only need to go there once. Other people might need to go there a few times. But again, it's just getting in the habit of building awareness and believing that you can live your best life and that you don't have to be here and just suffer. I think a lot of us feel really helpless in that transition period between a young adult and an adult, and like a teenager and an adult. So many things feel out of our control when we're young, and not everybody is being given the right information in terms of how to move out of a space where you feel like decisions are being made for you and moving into a space where you can feel empowered to make your own decisions. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say today. Remember that it's okay to be the bad guy in some people's story, in other people's narrative. Doesn't mean that it's easy to come to terms with, but building awareness around, the light within you and then also the darkness within you, because humanity is light and dark. And humanity is made up of individuals. Therefore, individuals have light and dark in them too. Try to educate yourself on different perspectives and ways of seeing the world. And good luck. I love you a lot. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Instagram at AmberAkilla and at friend.crush. I always really appreciate when people message me and say that they've been listening. So please continue to do that if you are enjoying what you're hearing, and always feel free to send questions and suggestions to me. I will catch you in the next one. Stay hydrated, tell your friends and family that you love them, and go be a better person. Bye.